So when people from big corporates talk about being more innovative, one of the first buzzwords you will hear is we want to be more agile. So sure, it's easier said than done. So because sometimes they will need a bit more than just putting a few stickies on the wall from time to time, because agile is a mindset and it needs close collaboration and actually a lot of work to put that in place. So Jonas Vonlanthen is a pioneer in agile management and self-organization in Switzerland, and he's a true expert on the topic, and he has a lot of practical experience. As a partner at Liip, he leads the development of the digital agency, and since 2015, he focuses on Liip's evolution from a hierarchical to a self-managed governance system using Holacracy. Super interesting. Running a company of 180 employees without boss, well, that sounds crazy, right? But well, let's see, and please welcome from Fribourg, Switzerland, Mr. Jonas Vonlanthen.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy. There's a lot of people, 50 people in the chat. That's a lot, and that's cool. I'm really looking forward to exchange with you on that topic of self-organization, which is a very important topic for us at Liip. So yeah, as Steph said, I like if the presentation is a bit interactive, and so because sometimes when you have to ask questions at the end, then you tend to forget them when you get to the end of the presentation, and I think it's too bad. So I really am totally okay to be interrupted by questions. And if you want to do that, there is a nice feature in Zoom. If you just open the participants list, there is a button on the bottom of your Zoom screen, participants. Then you see the list of participants, and you can click on the button raise hand. You can test it right now if you want. Just if you raise your hand, then I will see that who has a question. So if I see a blue hand coming, and then I will stop, and you can ask your question. So we're still on the topic where you want to ask a question. So it's totally fine for me. And I also have a timer on my side, so don't worry, Steph. I won't go over time.
That's good. Timer. Yeah, and just write your questions on the chat. And as soon as there's a question, maybe we can tell Jonas, and we can ask the questions.
The chat as well is totally fine. Okay. So let me share the screen and let's get started now. I just have to choose the right window here. And also quickly organize.
All good, it's working.
I just need to see the chat as well. Where is it? Here. Right. Okay. So yeah, so we'll have a little bit less than an hour to talk about self-organization. I really want to try to go into some practical details, because there is a lot of buzzwords. There's a lot of buzz going around self-organization and agility in general. And the thing is there's a very only a few examples where you actually see that in practice. And I want to go a little bit more in practice into what we do actually at Liip right now. And maybe this gives you some tips as well if you want to run a company with almost 200 people without bosses. And this is possible. It's actually happening. So, but let's get to the problem maybe first before we dive into the topic. And today you probably have seen this term as well, which comes from the army, VUCA, which expresses quite well how the world is today. And of course, as you know, it's more and more volatile, less stable than it used to be. Everything is changing faster and faster. It's also uncertain, meaning it's difficult to anticipate. The forecasts that we used from the past, they don't really work anymore. They're not really so relevant. Of course, as you know, it's more complex than before. So it's difficult to understand. And of course, the last topic is as well, it's always less clear than it used to be. The approaches where we say best practice approaches or one-size-fits-all approaches are not really working anymore. And the thing is that at the same time, we also have tremendous advances in technology. If you look at this video, which is quite known, it's a Tesla self-driving. It's already dating back from more than 4 years ago. And it's crazy when you think that we can have like cars start driving around by themselves. Now, looking a bit deeper into the organizations themselves, the way they work, the way they're organized, there's not such a big difference from 100 years ago, from the coming of Taylorism, actually. I mean, most of the companies, 9 out of 10, they're probably still pretty traditionally organized. And it's a bit like if we get back to the world I come from, the digital world and tech world, it's a bit like if you take a very modern mobile phone and you put an operating system that dates way back on top of it. So therefore, pretty unable to use the hardware that is in that phone. Of course, this leads to pressure, to stress, and to demotivation, as we know. It's one of the key problems that the companies are facing today. There was a study done by Gartner a few years ago, like really large, about employee motivation, and they came up with the number that less than 20% of the employees are actually really committed and engaged satisfied by the work experiences that they have. So this leads me a bit to now. Let's look a bit at Liip, at our company, how we went from being a traditional to self-organized. But before I go into that, very quickly, I just tell you what we do. We're a Swiss company. We are based in 5 different offices in Switzerland. We're a bit less than 200 people now. And the things that we do are mostly web stuff. So web applications, mobile applications, and that kind of things. For example, for Freitag, the backpacks, and we do the e-commerce for them and things like that. Just that so that you understand the type of people that we have. Of course, we have project managers in the company. We have salespeople. We have, of course, a lot of designers and UX specialists. And we also, I mean, the most part of Liip is composed of developers. We have a lot of the developers. And if I look back in the more than 10 years at Liip, there is 3 milestones that actually brought us towards more self-organization. And I mean, towards the way we are actually now. And they had a significant impact. And the first one is actually in 2009, we were about 30 people. And we looked for ways to be able to deliver more often and faster to clients. So there was a need from the market to deliver more and faster. And at the same time, it was a real challenge with the traditional project methodologies, as everything must be getting more and more complex. So we kind of looked for different ways. And for those of you from the USA, 2009 was probably late for Scrum already. But in Switzerland, it was pretty early. I think there were not so many companies doing Scrum at the time. And by the way, it was actually an American coach that actually trained us initially. So what we did then is actually we trained the whole 30 people and started to do in 2009 only projects with using the Scrum methodology. Scrum is an agile project management methodology. It's very efficient for complex software problems. The thing why I speak about that is that because in Scrum there is already some concepts that we still have now. For example, the fact that there is no team boss, team leader, but there is different roles. And those are the things that we still have now. And by the way, we still do our client project using that Scrum methodology. So at the time when we were organized, after we implemented Scrum, we were organized a pretty traditional way. We had Scrum teams that were composed mainly of developers, designers, and product owners and Scrum masters, like the green teams that you see on my screen. And then we had support functions. We had a management team, we had a marketing team, an HR team, a sales team, and operations team, for example. I'm not sure anymore exactly in the details, but basically this was how it was organized. It worked quite well like that. So we added more teams and teams as we grew. And then we arrived at about, I would say 70 people, I think. It was in 2012, 13, like that, when we actually realized that we had typical silo problems, like the sales team were selling things and they were too far away from the production team, so they were kind of a bit decoupled, and it caused some typical silo problems that you can find in usually big organizations that are traditionally organized. So we wanted to move away from that, and at the time we were reading a lot what was happening in a few places, and for example, we read a lot on the Spotify blog, and Spotify, they shared a lot on how they were organized, and they had to grow for a handful of developers to more than hundreds of developers in a very short time. So it served as inspiration for us. So we actually then reorganized the company, the teams this way. We basically integrated all the support functions into the teams directly. And we created bigger teams. Before that, teams were about 5 to 7 people. And after that part was more 10 to 12 people. And the idea was that a team could handle a client from A to Z, like a small company inside Liip. At that time, we still had a management team and a few electrons libres, how we call them in French, that the people we had one person doing marketing, for example, and we had one person doing HR, and those didn't really fit in the team, so they kind of stayed on their own. I see there is a question, Tom. I don't know, as we know each other, I'm not sure if you want to ask a question now. If you do, just feel free to ask. Thomas. Oh, maybe he's not here. Don't hesitate if you come back. So the thing also I wanted to say about that is that the coordination between those teams happened through guilds, which was kind of communities of practice where people would actually sit together. For example, we had a guild of designers, we had a guild of developers and things like that, and they would coordinate between the teams like that. And it worked really well. So we grew up to about 100 people like that. And when we arrived at 100 people, we were seeing 6 managing directors and then 100 people. So we had no other management levels at that time. And we realized that us, the managers, we were becoming the bottlenecks. So we were doing too many things that didn't really have much value added, like approving things, signing documents, or things like that. And we had to find a way to be able to distribute the leadership, the responsibility across the company. So we went in a retreat and we started reading books and looking what was around. And we stumbled upon this book from Frédéric Laloux. I don't know if a few of you have read it, but it's a very interesting book where Frédéric, which is a scientist, actually analyzes a few, I think more than 1,000 organizations. And he basically defined these different types of organizations. So I don't have the time to go into details now, but basically those are the red organizations where it works based on fear. The other ones were actually the respect of order is key. The third one, which is basically maximizing profit, is what's the purpose and the goal of the organization. And the green ones are the ones which are more culture-centered, human-centered. And then there was a few of those organizations did not really fit in those buckets. I mean, of course, in a real world, you never are completely yellow or completely orange, but you could always see where a company would fit best. But there was a type of company that still did not fit in that, and this is what they called what he called teal. And the characteristic of these companies are that they function with self-organization instead of hierarchical relationships. So it works with peers relationship instead. They have a strong sense of purpose. So the organization itself has a reason to exist, and it will evolve over time as the organization is facing its environment and what is around. And they also all had this integrated this concept of wholeness. That means as an employee, I can show up at work as I am myself. I don't have to put a mask to go to work. And that inspired us a lot. It kind of stuck. It sounded to us as like the next step to take. But at the same time, Lalu doesn't say how you do it. So it just gives some examples of companies that work like that. But then if you really want to learn how, then you still need to search further. And this is when we actually searched for actual systems. And there was one of them was Holacracy, and there was a few other things interesting around. And then the only system that was actually complete was Holacracy. And that spoke to us because remember when I said we integrated Scrum in 2009, it was similar. So Scrum also had books, also had trainers, other companies doing it. And we could basically use that as a complete system. The only difference was that with Holacracy, it's a complete system to run a company. So we did a test for 6 months, and then we actually in January 2016 we implemented Holacracy fully across the organization. So it's been 4 years now, and we would not come back. So this is kind of for the introduction, and now I want to go a bit deeper into the details of the mechanics of how it works. Do you have any questions so far?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Remy has one. Yes, Remy.
Can I go? Yeah? Can you hear me well?
Sure.
Yeah. So thank you for this introduction. The question is just what decided you to change of system? Which observations were you making at first, which led you to the conclusion that Holacracy was really something desirable for your organization?
Mm-hmm. So the observation was really that we had the impression we were becoming slower and slower, and that was a real challenge for us as we were really into this agile mindset. We wanted to stay fast and be able to deliver and efficient all the way. And we realized that we were getting slower. The decisions were longer to take, also because we were a lot of people. I mean, we didn't have these issues at 50 people, but with 100, it was really hard to handle. And then we also realized that a lot of things was on the management team's shoulders. And even if we were trying to empower the people, like giving them we were always saying, just do it, decide by yourself and do it. But in the end, they would always come back and ask for advice. And in fact, it was this guy's way to ask for concrete decision, in fact. And this is actually why we wanted to push it further than just empowering. And we wanted to stay close to the market. We wanted to see that to still have maintain the high level of motivation of people and distribute this responsibility. So we had a few key questions that we asked ourselves, and then we went on and searched for ways to solve those questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
There was a question from Andre. Oh, it disappeared. All right, so I can continue in the details now. How does it work concretely, Holacracy? And so basically what it means is that at the beginning, especially when you implement Holacracy, what you do is basically you give, as a power holder, as an owner of the company or as a top manager, you basically give your power to the constitution. And the constitution is a building block of Holacracy. It's like the first block. And it's a document, it's open source, it's translated in multiple languages. You can have a look at that online. It's even through GitHub, and there is many versions now. The version 5 is coming, but the official release is version 4.1. And it's a book of rules, a bit like the Swiss constitution. We are used to that in Switzerland. There is Article 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where everything is defined, and we basically defined how you define the work, how you run the meetings, and a lot of things are defined in there. So this is where the power goes then into the system, and actually then the power is the authority is really decentralized. If we look a bit how the power is how it's distributed, in the right part of the screen you see it's the traditional way that we all know about, the pyramidal way. The higher you go in the pyramid, the more power you have, which is the light gray parts. Like the CEO basically in an organization is like a king. He basically can do whatever he wants. If you look at an holacratic organization, we are organized in circles and roles. So a role is like those white dots that you see. And sometimes those roles are grouped together into circles because it makes sense that they work together. And actually what the difference here is that the most power is actually at role level in Holacracy. Because in Holacracy we say, this person who works actually knows best, and they basically whenever you have a role in the organization, you have a lot of power, and you can basically do whatever decision you want as long as you work into your role's purpose.
Jonas, there's a great question from Berad about money.
Great.
Do you get paid more under Holacratic system?
Totally not. No, actually, so you could, but at Liip, so Holacracy doesn't say how you handle salaries, but it gives you ways to organize your company, to organize those meetings, etc. But the thing is that you still need to define the meat that is inside, how you want your system, how you want your company to work. For example, at Liip, we now have a totally open salary system where everybody can see everyone's points and salaries, but it doesn't need to be in that way actually in Holacracy. The thing is that in our case, we have a salary that is totally decoupled from Holacracy roles. So it doesn't matter if you have a role with more prestige than another for your salary. Your salary is basically evaluated by other peers on different axes that we actually defined as being important for the company. All right, let's continue. So I was back into the presentation. So looking at circles and roles, this is on my screen how you see, this is our org chart right now at Liip. So you see there is a big circle, which is the company circle. And then we have defined that there is a production circle where all the teams are in, and that we have then a location circle where all the offices are in. And then we have a marketing people. But this is our own way of how we defined it. But this is basically how an org chart under Holacracy looks like. Now, an example as a role or a circle, how it's defined. There is always a purpose, which basically gives the authority to act in that role. And in that example, you can see for marketing and communication, we could have Liip is known by everyone in target market. A good purpose is like a Northern Star. So you know to which direction to go, but you never really reach it, right? The accountability, on the other hand, is something more concrete. Like, for example, here, creating content for channels, organizing events, analyzing markets, for example. This is basically the tools we use to define the work, to define what is expected. Now, the thing which is also very different from a traditional organization is that on one way, we have roles and circles that the company needs to run. And we define that. And on the other side, we have people in the organization. And those people can take one or multiple roles. And of course, a role can be taken by one or multiple people. So this is also a change of mindset, because in a traditional way, you usually are one function. So you are here for your function, and usually you don't go out of, I mean, you don't do something that is different. In Holacracy, it's much more dynamic. So I could have some roles which are HR related, and at the same time some development roles. This is totally possible in an Holacracy company, given that you have the skills and that that you actually can do that work. And of course, then now you can imagine we have a lot of people working in different roles. How do we keep all these people aligned together and working in the same direction? So as you understood, there is no there is no hierarchy of person anymore, but there is a hierarchy of purpose. And this is how we align. So there is the company itself as an overall purpose, and then all the circles and the roles below that have also a purpose they work in, and they have, of course, to respect the purpose that is on top of that. For example, for Liip, we have defined our purpose as wanting to create long-lasting social, environmental, and economic value by striving for digital human progress. So this is the overall Liip purpose, and everything that is under is kind of relating to that purpose. And there is also another question that also often comes up is that, okay, you have those people in those roles and they can take decisions. How do you ensure that they actually decide in the interest of the company? And we do that using strategies. And strategies in Holacracy is seen as rules of thumbs, and they act kind of a compass that will give direction to people when they take decisions. And what you can see on the right is the basic strategies like that we have at the company level. Those are principles, and those that know Agile, you can see that it somehow relates to the Agile manifesto. It's the same structure, the way it's done. It means that both sides are important. For example, trust over control. Sometimes it's important to control things. But in our company, we decide to trust more than control. The same for open over closed. For example, this is also why I'm sharing so much of the company here, because it's we have a culture of sharing everything we have. And we always choose the open over the closed. And this is really, it's a very strong tool, because I see sometimes in our chats, in our Slack channels where people chat, and sometimes they're not sure what decision they can take. And then somebody just leaves that, hey, open over closed, let's share that. It really works. All right. And now that you've heard a bit about that, how does change happen into such an organization? And with Holacracy, there is this concept of tension. They call it tension, which is rather neutral in English as a word. It's not so neutral in German or in French, which is usually negatively connotated. But here it's really meant in a neutral way. Tension is a gap between reality and a felt potential, may it be positive or negative. And the interesting thing is that you have actually two processes where you can actually go and solve these tensions. A tension is something that you usually feel in your gut. We all have tensions with our work, and sometimes we can solve them ourselves, sometimes we can't. And the interesting thing is that here in Holacracy, everyone can come up to those processes and have those tensions solved. And those processes, there is one of them is a tactical meeting. It's a tactical process. It's really about giving visibility to the work, synchronizing the people, and triaging those issues. Like, for example, if I need the help of someone, or if I need to share something with the others or get some information, I would go to that meeting and try to solve my tension with that in that meeting. So this is kind of a more like operational meeting. We all have that in our teams where we actually synchronize on projects, organize the work. So there is no rocket science here. The very interesting thing here is that we also have a governance process. Usually in a traditional organization, we have the top management that basically organizes, and then they roll it down and they reorganize the whole organization when they have decided. Here, each circle, that means each group of roles working together, they have their governance process. So anyone having a role in a circle can come up to that meeting and they can propose a governance change. And a governance change is like changing the role, changing a rule, creating a policy or a domain, which is like a property of a circle or a role, for example. All of that, you can only do that in these governance meetings. And before we go into questions, the interesting thing here in governance meeting is that the way decisions are taken. And the way we take decisions we use consent decision making. And I like to compare that with consensus, especially in Switzerland, we use consensus a lot. Usually consensus works like that. You get all around the table, you speak a lot, and you try to agree on something, right? The problem with that is usually when you want to get to agreement, usually you have to do concessions. You have to give in, right? And it kind of denaturates your proposal if you come up with a proposal. This especially because we are trying with consensus to reach the common preference of people, what people prefer, what are the best ideas, and it's very narrow, right? The consent decision-making, the question is totally different. I don't ask the people if they agree with me. I ask the people if they see a reason it causes harm. So if they have an objection, if they see a reason it's going to harm us, right? So this is how we actually decide. So a proposal will come, and the question that will be asked to the others: do you see a reason this causes harm? You see a bit the difference of in terms of energy. If you're in consensus, the person proposing has to give all the energy to convince the others. In a consent decision making, the energy that has been to be brought by the people has to be brought by the people that actually want to object and that see a reason it is going to cause harm. And the outcome of that is actually that I realize now after 4 years of Holacracy that there is a lot of decisions that are taken in all levels of the organization very quickly with that system. And that means actually, as you see, you remember this org chart with a lot of circles. That means that we have those type of decisions at a lot of different areas in the company. I see now it's just happening. Things are happening in other offices, and I'm like, oh wow, they're all already doing that. And it was never possible before, because before that it was always coming up to the managers to get some kind of agreement, and then everybody waits until the decision is taken. And here it's just happening with this system, and the company structure is then evolving constantly, and it's a bit like this swarm of birds. They still manage to get together. There's no leader or that is on top, but they still manage to get together, but they still manage to go south when it's becoming very cold in Switzerland. And it's a bit like the metaphor that I like to use with the organization that we have today. So I'm done with the slides, and very, very happy to welcome a few of the questions we might have now.
Thank you so much, Jonas. So there are quite a lot of questions that were in the chat. We don't want to interrupt you actually, because so if you can stop sharing screen, so we're gonna be able to see the people on screen, and maybe you can. So yeah, we have 5 minutes for questions. So maybe you can choose two.
I have to choose two.
Yeah.
Oh. The question from Jackie about how do we set purpose? It's an interesting question. Actually, this purpose is actually set in a governance meeting, and so I mean, if I'm at company level, the governance meeting that we will have at company level has the right to decide to define the purpose of all the sub-circles that are under the company level, but not further down. And this is why we are actually in self-organization. What is further down is self-organized as well. So we can only influence on the level we are actually involved in.
Great.
Yeah.
So that's Jackie's.
Choose them for me because it's hard. It's a lot to read.
There was a question about how Scrum helps you transition to Holacracy. Yeah, it's from Xavier. Xavier, do you want to ask it?
Yeah. Hello, Jonas. Thanks for the talk. As you explained, you first moved into Scrum methodologies and into UX. So I just wanted to know if it helped you in the process of moving to Holacracy. And for other companies, for example, if you're not really into agile, into UX? Is it a big problem or not?
It's not a big problem, but it definitely helps to be in Scrum and Agile initially, because the mindset is actually pretty close from. I mean, the Scrum. There is a lot of things in Holacracy that sound familiar to Scrum practitioners, because the mindset is actually similar. I mean, we really are totally into iterations, for example. Those governance meetings, tactical meetings, they always happen again and again. And a good enough proposal is better than nothing to start. So, and this is really a mindset that if you already do Scrum, you're already used to do that. But if you come from another company where traditional one, usually you try to have a more perfect way, and then you roll it out, right? So it's a real change of mindset, and it helps if you are into UX because you are a lot client facing, asking a lot of questions, interviewing, and things like that. And you always know that you are actually never perfect. The important thing is the process, is to go towards being better, but you never actually are there. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
There is a great question from François Descarreaux. François, if you want to ask it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the talk. I was, well, Holacracy seems to be really, really great. And I was wondering what are the disadvantages, if there are some, that the Holacracy maybe can have, or that you encounter since the establishment at Liip?
So there are some challenges, of course. I would say the first challenge is that a lot of people don't have no clue about it. So when we hire people, we have to train them. So I mean, until we have much more other companies that are actually doing it and doing it right, we will have to continue in doing that. And even if they get training in their onboarding sessions pretty early on, it takes a few weeks or months until they actually really get into that. That's a challenge. And the other thing as well that we kind of underestimated, I would say, at the beginning, is that actually Holacracy is a system to organize the work and the company. It doesn't solve everything, right? It's just about organizing the work. And the thing is, there is an interesting, there is some discussions about that as well. It's important that people understand that it's not going to solve people problem. It's not going to solve, it doesn't mean you would never need a mediation in a company anymore. So the HR aspect is still important, and it's becoming even more important as we are asking the people. I mean, with Holacracy, we have no more bosses, but we have more leaders, because these people that have the roles, they take decisions themselves. And so for some, it's a challenge, and for others, it's perfect. I mean, it's paradise, right? So some people are stressed by that as well, and we also need to accompany them so that they are okay to also take their own decisions. And so we definitely had to develop a bit more this accompaniment in terms of HR after we implemented the Holacracy. Another example is before, when there was a conflict between two people. When people can't speak between each other, they usually go to the boss and say, hey, you decide, so then we know how we can continue, right? Or you solve that for us. Now we don't have that anymore. So if you can't work with a colleague, then you have to find ways to solve it. And a lot of people are not trained in that, in doing that in a traditional role. So now we also have feedback, receiving feedback, giving feedback trainings, also for all employees that join us. This is mandatory. We have conflict resolution trainings, all those things that we actually didn't really have before. So yeah, it's a challenge, but I mean, we have to be aware of that if we implement Holacracy.
Okay, thank you.
There's a hand.
Yeah, we're going to take one last question. We have just time for one.
Okay, good. So,
which one do you choose?
Jeroen. I don't know how you say that, but
Jeroen
as a high Jeroen as a hand.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for the inspiring talk. I was just wondering, you started this whole journey with an existing organization and you changed your management model. There's so many startups in this world or entrepreneurial initiatives where you start with 3, 5, 10 people and you start building your organization. Do you believe that this is also appropriate to start from grassroots level as an organization?
I think it is. I think it works. It's not necessarily needed because usually, from my experience, I would say up to 10, 12 people, you don't really need a system like that because usually it's pretty straightforward. You know who does what. You don't need a system. But when you get to 20 or 30 people or more, then you actually need something. And now we are in contact. We also start helping now other organizations that want to do the same journey as we do, because we have that experience. And we realize most of them, they are either 30 to 40 people, or they are 100, 120. It's like kind of where you actually need to start thinking to organize differently. But on the side, I'm in an organization where we decided to implement Holacracy right from the start, and we are 7 people, and it works well as well. So I think it's fine, but it's not needed when you're actually really small.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonas, for sharing all of that. You have way more to share, of course. Will you be part of the networking sessions?
I think so, yeah.
Amazing. So big round of applause for Jonas.
Thanks.
And take a short break. We are back in 5 minutes with Leila van Alvensleben from Mural.